Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and after the Battle of Chickamauga, Longstreet would butt heads with Braxton Bragg. On September 22nd, McLaws' division led the Confederate infantry to Chattanooga, where Longstreet ordered him to attack the Union works. McLaws argued that he would incur a great amount of casualties and didn't have enough ambulances. This furthered the rift between Longstreet and McLaws. The Army of Tennessee settled in on the elevated terrain around Chattanooga and took stock of the battle days before. Major General John C. Breckinridge allegedly exclaimed as he rode by his cheering men that Longstreet is the man, boys, Longstreet is the man. Newspapers circulated stories that Longstreet lifted up the spirits of the Army of Tennessee, stating, "Never in the war has any general been found who was superior to General Longstreet in the art of what is here called putting in his men." Lee would write 5 days after the battle to Longstreet saying, "If it gives you as much pleasure to receive my warmest congratulations as it does me to convey them, this letter will not have been written in vain. My whole heart and soul have been with you and your brave corps in the late battle. It was natural to hear of Longstreet and Harvey Hill charging side by side, and pleasing to find the army of the East and West vying with each other in valor and devotion to their country. Finish the work before you, my dear general, and return to me." One of Longstreet's biographers claimed, "The orderliness and the mode of attack rank him as one of the preeminent combat generals of the war. Few officers of that rank grasped the realities of or situation on a battlefield better than Longstreet. He saw what would not work at Gettysburg and fashioned what would work at Chickamauga. He had advocated the strategic combination that brought him and his troops to Chickamauga, and then utilized his intellect and experience to formulate the tactical scheme that brought victory. It was the performance of a first-rate soldier, of a man who knew his trade." In the weeks after Chickamauga, Longstreet became embroiled in a scheme within the Army of Tennessee. Braxton Bragg was not liked by his subordinates, and he alienated many of them. Longstreet didn't think much of him as a commander or person, and Longstreet would be prominent in the attempt to oust Bragg from the command of the Army of Tennessee. Bragg's own chief of staff, whom the Army commander had known since West Point, stated, "He is very earnest at his work. His whole soul is in it, but his manner is repulsive, and he has no social life. He is easily flattered and fond of seeing reverence for his high position. If he don't want news to be true, he will listen to nothing. Frankly, I am afraid of his generalship, and would think the cause of the country far better placed in other hands. That he may have success I pray and wish, but he has not genius, and if our circumstances make this call upon him, he will fail in our hour of need. His mind is not fertile, nor his judgment good." On the night of September 22nd, Longstreet, Leonidas Polk, Daniel Harvey Hill, and Simon Bolivar Buckner met to discuss removing Bragg from command. Longstreet and Polk consented to write the authorities in Richmond and Robert E. Lee, arguing to remove Bragg from command and replace him with either Lee or Beauregard. The Anti-Bragg coalition had fought the commander for months, but now they had a leader in Longstreet. He was the senior lieutenant general, and he was respected in the Army and in Richmond. They hoped he would be listened to in the removal of Bragg. Longstreet wrote to Secretary of War James Seddon that, "To express my convictions in a few words, our chief has done but one thing that he ought to have done since I joined the Army. That was to order the attack upon the 20th. All other things that he has done, he ought not to have done. I am convinced that nothing but the hand of God can save us or help us as long as we have our present commander." Longstreet even suggested that Lee be sent to command the Army of Tennessee. On October 4th, Longstreet, Hill, and Buckner prepared a petition to be signed by generals in the Army and be submitted to Jefferson Davis to remove Bragg. When the Army commander learned of the petition by the Cabal of generals, he sent a telegram to Davis to intercede in the matter. Davis left Richmond on October 6th and arrived outside Chattanooga on October 9th. Davis met with Bragg first, then, with Bragg sitting in the corner of a room, brought many of the senior generals of the Army in and asked them to assess General Bragg. Longstreet reluctantly went first. He stated that Bragg was incompetent to lead the Army, and Buckner and Benjamin Cheatham agreed. Davis didn't expect such a statement with Bragg sitting in the room. After the meeting, Davis met with Longstreet and Buckner individually, since they were the two prominent leaders of the Anti-Bragg group. On October 12th, Davis delivered a speech that reaffirmed his confidence in Bragg. The attempt to remove the Army commander had failed. As soon as the president left, Bragg began to take revenge on the generals who opposed him. He relieved D.H. Hill of command and reduced Buckner to divisional command, disbanding his Department of East Tennessee. Bragg would never forgive Longstreet. Bragg prepared for both an offensive operation against the Union Army garrison Chattanooga and a siege. He gave Longstreet the role of occupying Lookout Mountain and the all-important Lookout Valley, which housed one of the Union's best supply routes. Some of Longstreet's troops occupied the valley to put further strain on the Union garrison. In late October, Longstreet did receive great news: the birth of a son in Richmond. The child would be named Robert Lee Longstreet. Lookout Valley was held by the brigade of Evander Law. He placed his regiments to guard the valley and Brown's Ferry. However, when he took a leave of absence to visit his friend John Bell Hood, who was convalescent about 30 miles south of Chattanooga, his acting division commander, Micah Jenkins, withdrew 3 of his regiments from guarding the river and returned them to the east side of Lookout Mountain. To make matters worse for Longstreet and the Army of Tennessee, Ulysses S. Grant had arrived on the scene, replaced William S. Rosecrans with George Thomas to command the Army of the Cumberland, and began moving troops to Chattanooga to break the siege and open up a stable supply line. Cavalry and commanders warned Longstreet of an increase in Federal activity along the Tennessee River and Lookout Valley, but Longstreet didn't act on the reports or alert Bragg of the movements. When Law returned, he found 3 of his regiments no longer occupying Lookout Valley and began moving them back, but it would be too late. The Union attacked what Confederates were left in the valley and took control of the river crossing. Bragg rode to meet with Longstreet to discuss what Longstreet was going to do to combat the loss of ground. More Federal troops, those under Joseph Hooker, were arriving in the valley and were taking over the area. Bragg gave him permission to use multiple divisions, including William H.T. Walker's division, to accomplish the goal of driving the Federals from the valley, and also gave him permission to launch a night attack. Longstreet opted just to use Micah Jenkins's division, Hood's old division, to fight this battle. Although the Confederates had some success in the Battle of Wauhatchie, it ended in a defeat for the South and opened up a stable supply line for the Union soldiers at Chattanooga called the Cracker Line, for all of the hardtack crackers that moved across that route. However, one of the worst outcomes of the battle was the inner rivalry between the commanders in Jenkins' division. The brigadier generals in the division didn't like Jenkins, who Longstreet favored over all the other brigade commanders, and specifically requested the young man when he was sent to the Army of Tennessee. Evander Law believed that he should have been given division command, but Longstreet didn't care for Evander Law. Law and men like Jerome Robertson fought back against Jenkins's accusations of disobeying orders and dereliction of duty, but Longstreet would side with Jenkins in the rivalry. On November 3rd, Longstreet met with Bragg, William J. Hardee, and John C. Breckinridge to discuss dispatching Longstreet's troops for duty further north. Longstreet suggested moving his troops into Middle Tennessee to cut the supply lines of Grant, but all the other generals thought that was an impracticable move because of the logistics, so it was decided to send Longstreet north to Knoxville and eliminate Ambrose Burnside from the region. 2 days later, Longstreet began moving his troops along the East Tennessee and Virginia Railroad toward the city of Knoxville.